Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Beirut, Lebanon on April 11, 2026 for Reason to Resist. The official death toll from Israel's April 8th attacks on Lebanon has risen to 357 persons. Lebanese authorities report that more than 1,200 were wounded in those attacks. This is by far the biggest one-day death toll in Lebanon since the Lebanese Civil War, which ended in 1990, 36 years ago. Israel carried out the April 8th massacres approximately 20 hours after Donald Trump declared that his regime had agreed to a 2-week ceasefire with Iran. When Israel carried out the April 8th massacres, it claimed that Lebanon was not included in the ceasefire agreement. But on April 8th, Pakistan's prime minister, who helped mediate the agreement, explicitly stated on social media that Lebanon was included in the deal. And here you can see his post. And he states in the opening paragraph, with the greatest humility, I'm pleased to announce that the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States, along with their allies, have agreed to an immediate ceasefire everywhere, I repeat, everywhere, including Lebanon and elsewhere, effective immediately. Now, I arrived in Beirut on April 9th, the day after the April 8th massacres, and yesterday, April 10th, I visited the ruins of various residential structures that Israel demolished on that bloody day. Those structures included an apartment building in the southern suburb of Beirut, Dahya. Before I arrived in Lebanon, the press had been denied for some time access to Dahya due to the extremely dangerous conditions there. It was being systematically bombed by Israel with savage ferocity. But yesterday, Lebanese security forces allowed a large contingent of international and local media to enter Dahya temporarily to inspect the damage. And I was fortunate to be part of that press contingent. In this video, I'll show you what I saw in Dahya and in other parts of Beirut that I visited yesterday. But before I do that, I wanted to talk more generally about what happened or has happened since I arrived here on the evening of April 9th. Since my arrival, there have been no Israeli attacks on Beirut, as far as I know. However, the sound of Israeli drones in the skies over Beirut have been loud and constant, and I have plenty of video to back this up. For example, watch and listen to this video, which I shot on the streets of central Beirut at approximately 10 p.m. local time last night. Now, as I say, that sound was constant last night and at times uncomfortably close. As I was walking in the streets of Beirut, central Beirut last night, it in fact sounded so close to me, that drone or whatever drone was up there, that at various points I felt the need to take cover under some trees. But the most important point is not the presence of drones. Rather, it's the absence of bombings of Beirut since my arrival. Israel continued yesterday to inflict heavy blows on South Lebanon, and the resistance continued to inflict heavy blows upon Israel, particularly the northern colonies in occupied Palestine. But since the bloody massacres of April 8th, the capital has been spared further bombing. That may be due to the fact that Trump is pressuring Netanyahu to enter into a ceasefire with Lebanon. That, at least, is what the Israeli press is reporting. This is an article from yesterday in the Times of Israel, which explained that the Prime Minister of Israel and Trump reportedly held a tense call on Lebanon, with Netanyahu fearing that the U.S. would declare unilateral truce with Hezbollah if he didn't accede. The article goes on to say that the Hezbollah leadership is urging the national government in Beirut to hold firm on issues of national sovereignty in reported talks between the genocidal entity and the national government. Now, Trump is, to be sure, under increasing strain to bring an end to this catastrophic war. Yesterday, newly released figures showed a huge increase in inflation in the United States. And this report by CNN notes a tripling last month in March of inflation due to a record spike in gas prices. That's extraordinary, a tripling in one month of the inflation rate. Now, this news could not have come at a worse time for Trump. It emerged just when the negotiations between the United States government and the Islamic Republic are about to begin in Islamabad, Pakistan. The Iranians will undoubtedly understand how this huge increase in inflation will expose Trump to a devastating defeat in the upcoming midterm elections. And if Donald Trump loses control of both the House and the Senate, particularly by a significant margin, almost surely impeachment proceedings for a variety of reasons would rapidly follow. And it's not out of the question that Donald Trump could find himself in the hoosgow before he leaves this world. Also, reports have emerged that Israel has almost no air defense interceptors left. This is an article by Dropsite News, which continues to do fine reporting on Israel's wars of aggression in the region. And they spoke to a U.S. official with knowledge of the situation, a Trump official, who said that the Israeli missile interceptors have dwindled to double digits. In other words, they have less than 100 of them. And if you bear in mind that they need to use at least 2 per ballistic missile, and oftentimes, as video has shown, they use well over 2 interceptors to take down a single missile. They are perilously close to running entirely out of interceptor missiles. Not that those missiles were doing an excellent job of intercepting Iranian ballistic missiles. They were not doing so at all. But they clearly are having to pick and choose which missiles they're going to take out, depending upon their estimation of what target it appears to be streaking towards and how valuable that target may be. Now, in light of Israel's ongoing attacks on Lebanon, the flow of maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz continues to be throttled by the Iranian military. And you can see here that on April 9th, so this would be on the far right side of this chart, 3 vessels went through the Strait of Hormuz, which happened to be the lowest point, or almost at the lowest point during the war. So this is the second full day following the announcement of the ceasefire. The level of traffic remains reduced by at least 95%, maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. And it's reported that the few that were allowed in were not, in fact, oil tankers, but were carrying dry cargo. So the pressure, upward pressure on the price of oil continues unabated. And that means that inflation will continue to rise because the price of oil and the price of gas will also continue to rise. And on top of all of that, you have other essential goods that normally pass through the Strait of Hormuz, including particularly fertilizer, as we enter the growing season in the Northern Hemisphere. So there is immense pressure on Donald Trump, undoubtedly coming from governments across the world, and particularly some key allies in Asia like Japan and South Korea and India, to bring an end to this god-awful criminal war that Trump and Netanyahu have unleashed. Now, reportedly, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has arrived in Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan, for peace talks with Iranian officials, and Iranian officials are there as well, and they have an unusually large contingent of persons with them. It appears that this is going to be a serious negotiation. Certainly the Iranians are taking it seriously. Whether or not that is going to result in a deal or even a prolonged discussion remains to be seen. There's plenty of reason to be skeptical, that the United States is serious. It has proven itself, the government of the United States and Israel, of course, to be treacherous and to be prone to negotiate in bad faith. But as the Iranians have been saying, their finger remains on the trigger, and this war is going to reignite quite quickly, I would imagine, if it becomes apparent in those discussions that the United States is simply, buying time or, persisting in a delusional belief that Iran is going to agree to a deal that doesn't constitute a major defeat for the United States. The United States has two options here. One is escalation and therefore the destruction of the global economy, or capitulation. Now, I also believe that Israel will do everything it can to prevent a peace deal that Iran can accept, and that Israel will behave itself only if Trump threatens credibly to withdraw United States aid from Israel. I doubt that Trump is ready at this point to use his leverage to force that outcome, but I don't exclude that possibility altogether because of the immense pressure on him to bring this to an end. However, in light of developments I just cited, I'm less skeptical about a real peace deal than I was a few days ago. And I would say there's now a realistic possibility, perhaps not a probability, but a realistic possibility of it happening within the next 10 days. Ultimately, that will require Trump to finally do what no U.S. president in my lifetime has done, which is to force Israel to accept a humiliating defeat, and one that may well result in the disintegration of this government and this apartheid state, or be left to its own devices to face the wrath of the people in the region, the indigenous peoples whom it has persecuted, terrified, and abused for decades. Now, before I share with you footage of the devastation I saw yesterday in Beirut, I'd like to remind you to like and share this video if you find it to be informative. And if you're not already a subscriber, please become one and help us to expand the reach of our unapologetic resistance journalism. So with that, let's turn to what I saw yesterday during my visits to the sites of Israel's April 8th attacks. First, I have a big picture comment about what I saw and about these attacks. Although it has been clear and widely acknowledged for decades that Israel has committed countless war crimes in this country, the question of whether Israel is now committing genocide in Lebanon has not truly entered the mainstream of international human rights discourse. I now believe, in my capacity as a lawyer and based on everything I've seen and heard from Israeli officials, that there is at least a plausible case to be made that Israel is committing genocide, not only in historic Palestine, but also in Lebanon, and particularly the part of Lebanon that lies south of the Litani River. It is beyond the scope of this video to review the question of genocide exhaustively, but I can and will make two overarching points about this issue. First, to be committing genocide within the meaning of the Genocide Convention, it's not necessary for Israel to have an intention to wipe out all or even most of the Lebanese people. And here up on the screen, you can see the definition of the crime of genocide under Article 2 of the Genocide Convention of 1948. And as you can see in the very first paragraph, it states, in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such, judicial interpretation of this clause has resulted in a principle that the part of the population or group that the perpetrator has an intention to destroy must be a material part. So it can't be an insignificant part of the population, it has to be material. But that can constitute far less than a majority of the members of the group. And you can see that Article 2 goes on to say that in addition to having that intention to destroy a material part of a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, the perpetrator must commit one or more of the following acts. Doesn't have to commit all of them, any one of them. And they include killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, And clearly, Israel has done all of those things in Lebanon. In fact, has been doing all of those things in Lebanon for years. But what has changed is the scope of these acts. They have become much more intense, widespread, lethal, and especially the rhetoric that has accompanied them, the rhetoric of the leaders of the genocidal entity. The Shia population of Lebanon surely constitute a religious group within the meaning of the Genocide Convention, Article 2, and the Lebanese people surely constitute a national group within the meaning of that provision. The second point I wish to make is that recent declarations from Israeli leaders clearly evince an intention to destroy a material part of the Lebanese people, and in particular, the Shia population of Lebanon. In a March 8, 2026 red flag alert from the reputable Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention, the Institute referred to one such declaration from an Israeli leader. You can see the first part of this red flag alert. It states the Lemkin Institute is extremely alarmed by Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich's warning last week that Beirut's southern suburbs would soon resemble Khan Yunis, a reference to the city in the southern Gaza Strip that has been completely flattened by over 2 years of Israeli bombardment. It is grotesque that a state minister would publicly threaten the Lebanese people with the same large-scale destruction, mass killing, and genocidal violence that has devastated the Palestinians in Gaza. From southern Lebanon to Beirut, the Bekaa Valley, and Tripoli, Israel is subjecting Lebanon to intense bombardment. And all of these areas of Lebanon include a high proportion of members of the Shia population. The Lemkin Institute goes on to say that the IDF has struck more than 500 targets since Monday, so that would have been the beginning of March, including 80 on Thursday. The scale, geographic scope, and coordinated intensity of these actions indicate an intent not merely to strike military objectives, but to inflict broad suffering and create conditions of life that render civilian existence unsustainable. And as you just saw, creating conditions of life that render civilian existence unsustainable is one of the 3 acts that an alleged perpetrator of genocide must commit to fall within the provisions of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. The Lemkin Institute's red flag alert goes on to state that Smotrich's declaration came after the IDF issued what it calls evacuation orders for the entire southern suburbs of Beirut. That would include Dahia, the area that I was allowed to visit yesterday with other members of the press, and which I'm about to show you. And it's described by the Lemkin Institute as the most densely populated residential neighborhood in the country. It is indeed, and that's apparent from a walk through the streets of Dahia. These orders, says the Institute, used extensively during Israel's ongoing genocide on Gaza and its previous war in Lebanon, have been widely condemned by international bodies and human rights organizations as unlawful and inhumane. The Israeli military frequently issues these warnings hours past midnight when everyone is asleep, often given 30 minutes or less for civilians to leave. And I would add, to leave before their residences are completely obliterated from the earth. And there's more here, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to read to you the rest of the Lemkin Institute's red flag alert. Now, I commend the Lemkin Institute for raising the issue of genocide during the past 5 weeks of satanic violence by the Israeli military in Lebanon. But as I say, other major human rights groups have yet to weigh in on this subject, and to do so in a conclusive way. Now, if that's the way, however, that the Lemkin Institute felt on March 8th, one can only imagine that it is even more alarmed now, because the scale of killing has increased. And as I just mentioned at the outset of this report, the April 8th massacres were the worst one-day death toll in Lebanon in 36 years, the 36 years that have elapsed since the end of the Civil War. Now, if anyone should understand the law of genocide, it is Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam. Why? Because before he became the Prime Minister of Lebanon, just before he became the Prime Minister of Lebanon, he was the president of the International Court of Justice, and assumed that august position in February 2024, becoming the first Lebanese president of the ICJ. So Despite his expertise in international law, I'm not aware of any public warning from Salam that Israel is committing genocide against his own people. On the contrary, as he has remained silent about this, the crime of crimes, he has agreed to enter into negotiations with the regime south of the Lebanese border that is terrorizing and destroying his own country. That, in my view, and to put it bluntly, is an utter disgrace. So too, by the way, is the person who replaced or who was expected to replace Nawaf Salam when he became the Prime Minister of Lebanon. The expectation was that he would be replaced by the Ugandan judge, the Vice President of the court, whose name is Sabutinde. Sabutinde, conveniently for Israel, is the one judge on the court who renders decisions that are always to the liking of the genocidal entity. And other people, a lot of people, including myself, have begun to suspect that this rabid evangelical Christian, Sabutinde, may be in a compromised position. As we all know, the Israeli regime has not hesitated to use compromat to force powerful officials to do their bidding. Let me turn then to the devastation I saw yesterday in Beirut. The first site that we visited was Corniche El Mazra in the western part of the city. And here's my report from that site, as well as from the other sites that I visited yesterday. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist on April 10th, 2026 from Beirut, Lebanon. I'm in the western Beirut quarter of Corniche Al Mazra, and this is one of the buildings that were struck on Wednesday, April 8th. In the space of 10 minutes, 110 sites were struck in Lebanon by the Israeli aggressor using 160 bombs approximately, and between 200 and 300 people were killed. At this particular site, we are told by rescue workers that so far they've determined that 20 people were killed here and approximately 100 persons were wounded. They don't have a final death toll because there are people missing. Either their bodies were taken to medical facilities, morgues, and they have not yet been added to the death count, or there are people still buried under the rubble here. And you may be able to see behind me there is machinery trying to dig down into the rubble to ascertain whether there are any more victims there. The Israelis, we are told, declared this series of strikes within these 10 minutes to be an attempt to wipe out much, if not all, of the current leadership of Hezbollah. It was what they described as the second pager attack, or senior Israeli military officials described it that way. But it turned out, from that respect, to be a complete failure. They failed to eliminate the Hezbollah leadership and instead killed a great number of civilians. And there's some speculation that if they had succeeded in their goal, they would then have accepted that the ceasefire applied to Lebanon, but because it failed, they're going to continue the slaughter. So this is our first stop in a series of stops today where we will be examining the sites struck during those horrifying 10 minutes. Now we'll enter into what remains of this residential structure behind me, and we'll give you a closer look at the scale of the destruction.
تعالى وحاشا أن يرد الله من هذا به. اللهم ارفع مقتك وغضبك عنا. اللهم تقبل
We have now moved from Corniche al-Mazra to the southern Beirut suburb of Dahya. This whole area that we are in now has been declared by the Israeli aggressor to be an evacuation zone. In order to enter here, we had to obtain permission from the security authorities. And you'll see that basically we're part of a large press entourage that has been granted temporary access to this area in order to document the damage, the very extensive damage that has been done here. So let's walk over and see what it is that we have been authorized to document.
راحت السيجارة عسكر فين ما تصوتوا على جوا راحت السيجارة لا أنا بدي أنتخب شاريبه قرب يا خي قرب اقف هون هلا بنمشي بالضربه واقف هون يلا قرب بس
Это портрет ребенка на доме. Этот удар был произведен несколько дней назад.
который покрыл под этими завалами десятки людей.
جديد معنا
جديد لا بأس زهر صحابي ما عاش عنا شيء بس بدنا ناخذ شوية اغراض لاولاد
As you can hear behind me, people are saying we refuse to actually be oppressed or anything else. We are now in Beirut southern suburbs in Hayy Sulim area. I grew up about 3 blocks down from here in Burj Ibrahim. I was born here. This area used to be olive groves and basically lemon groves and banana fields. People were displaced back in 1978, 1982 during the first and second Israeli invasion of Lebanon, and they made a life down here. They belong to South Lebanon. After the Israeli withdrew in 2000, those people basically went back down south and built their homes over there. They got displaced again and again because of the continued Israeli aggressions on Lebanon, especially in 2006. So now they are displaced all over again, and Israelis have destroyed their homes not only here but also down in South Lebanon.
Could you just introduce yourself and talk about your organization, your media organization?
For those who don't know, I'm a good friend of Mr. Lascaris over here, but my name is Leila Hatoum. I'm the founder of Mina Uncensored. I have in my pocket basically 25 years of journalism, mostly covering wars in this region.
Thank you very much, Leila. Much appreciated. So we're leaving the site of this, so we're moving on from this destroyed residential structure to another destroyed site here in this neighborhood, this part of Dakhla. As we were departing, they stopped the excavation because they thought that they might have found another body under the rubble. So far, 11 confirmed dead, many wounded at this particular, as a result of this particular atrocity. We have now moved to a neighborhood called Shwekat, which is on the edge of Dakhla. What you see behind me is the remains of a residential structure, a multi-level residential structure that was demolished. Here, emergency workers have counted 30 dead, over 100 wounded. There are believed to be several martyrs under the rubble, and they continue to attempt to locate their bodies. Right behind me here, this was a daycare center. That's what remains of the daycare center, and several of the killed were children in that daycare center at the time of this strike. This area was considered to be a safe zone to the extent that exists in Lebanon nowadays. After this building behind me was struck and these people were killed, the genocidal entity issued an evacuation notice for this area. So first they struck it, and then they issued an evacuation notice. I'm going to take you for a tour of the carnage around this site, and as you'll see, virtually every building that is within, I would say 50 meters, perhaps even 100 meters, has suffered significant damage, and in a few cases, catastrophic damage. Some of these buildings, I think, at this stage are probably uninhabitable. Not just the one behind me that's been leveled to the ground. This is a schoolyard that's about 75 meters from the blast site. As you can see, it's called the Cosmopolitan School, and rubble from the blast has found its way into the schoolyard.
No, this is like 400 meters away from the headquarters of the government.
Was this also on the Wednesday?
No.
When was this?
Before.
But after the war
Yes.
on Iran began.
Yeah, on this one. فينا حد في الرابع. So this is Dimitri, the role of the Lebanese army.
We have now moved to the center of Beirut. I am in a part of the central area of the city known as Ain Maraisi, and behind me is a Shia mosque, one of the few Shia mosques in the central part of Beirut. It's called the Ain Maraisi Mosque, and we've come here today because behind me over here is one of the residential buildings that was utterly demolished on April 8th, Wednesday, April 8th, when in 10 minutes of horror, Israel struck 110 sites in Lebanon with approximately 160 missiles and bombs, killing 250 or so people, the largest one-day death count since the Lebanese Civil War. And here at this particular site, 20 people were martyred, and 40 people from the building that was demolished, and also from surrounding buildings, which you will see were heavily impacted, were wounded. This was apparently a historical building which they have been in the process of restoring, and undoubtedly this has set back their efforts considerably. This building adjacent to the one that was leveled to the ground, doubtful whether that's going to continue to be habitable. You can see up there a chunk of the roof is barely hanging on, could come falling down at any time. And you can see that some damage was sustained also by this more modern structure behind the rubble. And these buildings have been heavily damaged. Somebody's Maserati paid the price. Well, I've now had an opportunity to survey much of the damage that was done in Beirut area on April 8th, 2026 by the Israeli genocide forces. My distinct impression from what I've seen thus far on this, my first day in Beirut, is that the Israeli military has greatly expanded the intensity, the frequency, the scope and nature of the attacks it has long been conducting on the civilian infrastructure and the civilian population of Lebanon. When you combine the acts, the crimes that we see on the ground with the increasingly genocidal utterances coming out of the Israeli senior political figures, I do believe that one could make a more than plausible case that Israel's genocidal campaign has now expanded beyond the borders of historic Palestine and is now being conducted here on the sovereign territory of Lebanon, which one would expect to be the case because Israel has been allowed to carry out its genocidal campaign in Palestine with total impunity for almost 2.5 years now. This will surely embolden the war criminals to adopt these same tactics of extinction, extermination of a civilian population beyond the borders of Palestine. Why would they stop when no one will stop them? This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Beirut, Lebanon on April 10th, 2026 for Reason to Resist.